My name is David Haig. I am the CEO of Brand Finance. We're here at the Brand Finance Global Forum to celebrate the strongest brands in the world.
On an annual basis, Brand Finance picks up a really important topic which is front and center for the debate in the field of branding, and this year's topic is extremely important, particularly given the macroeconomic conditions in the world today. Thank you again for inviting us to partner with you at this important forum which Brand Finance hosts every year.
It's a real example of how different sectors come together to represent nations. It was great to see the genuine interest from the delegates and really the depth of the questions they were asking.
The old days of sticking in your lane is no longer valid. You actually need to be a bit of a designer, a bit of an engineer, and I think designers are tremendous catalysts in a multidisciplinary group of people so that they actually develop ideas and products that work and fit a purpose. And I think that the more that groups of people like this get together to talk about that, the better.
At Brand Finance, we value brands from every country, every sector, every year, and we have a database of around 5,000 brand valuations that we create every single year.
Right, I think we're just about ready to start. Welcome to everyone. My name's Zoe, Events Executive at Brand Finance. Thank you for joining our first webinar of the Brand Finance Global Forum 2020 series in association with Tata Consultancy Services, where we will be exploring the topic, the value of design to society. We are pleased to be joined by over 200 people from all around the world today. I will shortly be handing over to David Haig, CEO of Brand Finance, who will be opening today's event. Just a quick note on housekeeping. The format of the hour-long webinar today will follow 3 10-minute presentations by our guest panelists, followed by a 20-minute Q&A session. You can submit all your questions to our presenters through the Q&A facility. And to confirm, we will be sharing a recording of the webinar after the session. We also kindly request that on leaving the webinar, you fill out a brief survey providing feedback that will be helpful for us to develop future webinars in our series. And finally, I would like to encourage all of you to engage with us on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook and Twitter using the hashtag BF Global Forum. And now I'm very pleased to hand over to David Haig to introduce today's session and our panelists.
Hello, hi. Well, as you know, I'm David Haig. I'm going to keep my introduction pretty short, but there are a couple of things I just wanted to say. First, on the 1st of April 1996, I set up Brand Finance, and normally we do these live events, normally at somewhere like the RAC Club like last year. Unfortunately, because of COVID, we've been forced to delay and we've changed the format. But I'm pleased to say that I think the way we've done the format is going to make it very interesting and stimulating. We're keeping it into 1-hour blocks, so it hopefully will keep people stimulated, and we've divided it into 3 related issues. Now, for the last 25 years, and next April is our 25th anniversary, we have been bridging the gap between marketing and finance, and as part of that, we create league tables, research, and I'm pleased to say that this year we were actually selected by the World Intellectual Property Organization to be their only brand measure in the Global Innovation Index. And interestingly, in that index, it isn't just branding, but also other types of innovation, which shows a close relationship with design. Now, we've been doing these forums since 2004, and the theme has always been understanding the value of ... fill in the gap. And so we've done nation and location branding, we've done sustainability, we've done sports, charities, and then we've looked at technical things like the value of advertising, PR, and digital. And famously, we actually had Matt Hancock to launch our digital conference, which is always very amusing because he launched his own personal app which ironically failed to work. And during the day, they raced around and finally managed to get it working, which seems to be repeating itself with the COVID crisis. But anyway, one of the things that we've discussed quite a lot is that design is a bit of a Cinderella. It's a hugely important area, but tends not to be looked at with the interest that it should. So we've decided to give it exposure this year. And we're looking at design in the context of society today, and then customers and business on the 2 subsequent occasions. Now, today we have John Mathers, who had a long career in commercial design and latterly as the CEO of the Design Council, but is now chairman of the British Design Fund and founder of the Design Age Accelerator. I hope it's not literally going to accelerate my age, but I'm sure it'll be very interesting to hear what John's got to say. And then secondly, Michael Albers, who's the Chief Creative Officer of W12 Digital Design, and our own Steve Thompson, who's going to give us some views about the use of insight to track the performance and contribution of design. And when they've given their presentations, Gabriela Salinas, the Managing Director of the Brand Finance Institute, will moderate, and then I'll tie up at the end. So with no further ado, I'm going to pass to Ashish Babu, who's the European CMO of TCS. TCS have very kindly supported us. I just briefly like to say thanks very much to the Foreign Press Association, the World Trademark Review, and the Museum of Brands also. But TCS has been our partner for several years and are very supportive, and we're grateful to have Ashish here to say a few words. Over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, David, for the introduction. It's great to be here virtually. I mean, I do remember last year was a fabulous event. I think this year, more than ever, I think we witnessed, technology, its ability to transcend borders and bring us all together. In whatever adversity, we're still together. In times of this, I think, it's important for us to stay close to our partners, networks, and obviously our friends. I think it's our association with Brand Finance that we partnered with this very relevant and insightful event. Before I dwell on the topic, I just want to recognize our partnership with Brand Finance. We continue to benchmark ourselves against the best using the Brand Finance's metrics, which has enabled us to become the fastest growing brand of the decade in IT services, something we at TCS are very proud of. I think despite the disruption we all faced, we've achieved so much in the last 6 months. I think it feels like a decade, but it's 6 months or 8 months for many. This, I believe, is thanks to the power of technology, and I think just building the agile mindset. A year ago, it would be unimaginable to think we would all now be accustomed to a daily mass virtual meeting, but here we are. I wanted to get into something quite interesting. TCS sponsors some of the biggest marathons like London, New York, Chicago, Boston, and Amsterdam. Most of these races have become virtual due to pandemic. If everyone's running in their homes, at their parks, and their surroundings, what they miss the most, it's the atmosphere, it's the crowd cheering, and it's the running in a tribe. And we thought of an idea from a runner's perspective. We use sonic design to create a soundtrack for Amsterdam Marathon, which is scheduled next week. It was to give a sense of noise to the runners, which was basically, the trams at the Dam Square in Amsterdam, bells of the cycles, boats in the canals, crowd cheering, and lastly, a music which is going to motivate you. This was all recorded while running to give the best 3D experience to the participants. We also brought in our ecosystem to collaborate. It featured the deputy mayor of Amsterdam, who would usually kick off a marathon, but this time was our strongest cheerleader. We brought in a celebrity DJ to create a soundtrack which will motivate each one of you to get out there and enjoy the marathon, and obviously the surroundings. And obviously, we tried a lot of that, with our clients and our customers to share that experience and perfect that product. I think the new world we live in, we're interacting online, we're working remotely, is likely here to stay till we get the vaccine. It raises a crucial question for marketers and designers. How do you rapidly innovate? in the right ways when the behaviors and expectations are changing so much and so fast. I think it's a collective responsibility for all of us to reimagine the human-centric design in today's context. I will end on a quote by Robert L. Peters, a celebrated designer and an author. Design creates a culture, culture shapes the values, and values determines the future. I'm looking forward to this session. To get this started, I would like to introduce John Mathers, Chair of this British Design Fund and co-founder of Design Age Accelerator. John, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Am I okay up and running? I hope so. So I'm going to talk about healthy aging by design. So let me start by asking you, put your hands up. How many of you in the audience today would describe yourself as aging? Well, the reality is that all of you should, because we start aging the moment we're conceived. So why is it that there's such a prejudice about an older generation? Why, once you've reached a certain age, does the remainder of society view you as on the way out and not to be really thought about? Why do most brands segment the hell out of a market and then finish with a 65 and older segment, as if somehow people over 65 are all a homogenous bunch, not really worth marketing to, and certainly not worth us deploying our bright young things to waste their time over? COVID has started to change all that, and as with the Black Lives Matter movement, has started to get us to reconsider all the inherent prejudices we have, words we speak and actions we take that we haven't really even thought about and considered before. And of course, the lexicon we use and the visual language we use around an older population only exacerbates the situation. So what I want to do today is to get you to think differently about an older population, understand the value it's worth, and how you can do good and be commercially focused. The world's changed, and older adults are now the #1 audience for entrepreneurs and marketers. It's an incontrovertible fact that no one here today can ignore. The mist is slowly lifting on the massive social impact of the pandemic, and a slew of research is shedding light on the challenges facing an aging population. And I think it highlights shifts in attitudes that solution providers can exploit. And there's no one better than design thinkers to hunker down over a bunch of new big problem statements to help businesses plot their path. So just a reminder of some of the mega trends. The aging market is growing rapidly. The number of people over 75 in the UK today is 1 in 12. By 2040, it's going to rise to 1 in 7. We're also living for longer, and a third of children born now are expected to live to 100, and so on. Whilst recent research has highlighted many of the challenges the pandemic has forced on older adults, it also highlights many of the positive changes that people in their 50s and 60s have taken on board. So what are some of those positive changes? Well, firstly, families spending time together. Secondly, health improvements. There's evidence to suggest it's been the spur that some have needed to switch up their routine. Thirdly, adopting technology. People in later life adapted amazingly well to digital comms during lockdown, with one of the biggest changes being in video calls. Fourthly, revival of community. And finally, simply reassessing lives. Spending so much time indoors has prompted people to think about the changes that they'd make about how and where they live. So aging is the new agenda. As key as climate change, age tech is going to blow everything else away. So let's get with the story or miss out. However long it takes for life to return to normal, there's no doubt the new normal will be different from the old as solution providers react to changes in behavior by providing new services to meet demand. What is clear is that while the older population has been little understood by marketers pre-pandemic, new customer segments and archetypes are emerging with needs and spending power. Dramatic changes to people's lives and their plans for the future demand a dramatic response. Brave and bold ideas that will shift systems forward rather than small incremental changes need to come to market. So let's just take a quick look at why collaboration between entrepreneurs and designers is vital to social and commercial success. And I want to focus on one thing, never the same again, the shifts we've seen in both behavior and the opportunities they throw up. So in August 2020, retail stalwart M&S hit the headlines, announcing plunges in sales of its clothing and homewares arms, but a surge of almost 40% in online sales. Last week, Tesco announced results which saw an almost 70% increase in online sales, with no indication of that slowing. And the headline numbers on how e-commerce and retail have changed during lockdown are pretty dramatic. The UK went from 20% e-commerce penetration to over 30% in 2 months. The USA from 17 to 20%, or 22%, I think it was. So we need to think retail. It's not a blip, it's permanent. Not only are older people going digital, they're spending more. For the first time, consumption of the over 65s exceeded those of the 18 to 29 group. The baby boomer generation entering the 50s today is larger and more affluent than any previous generation and no longer, on average, poor. So what is age tech? Age tech isn't on the radar of fast growth verticals, so says the latest accelerator report from Bohurst. But according to Alistair Gregg from 4G Ventures, age tech is where fintech was 10 years ago and coming on fast. By his estimates, the global age tech market will double from 1 to 2 trillion. Right now, he estimates that VC-backed age tech revenue is about 2 billion a year in the US. And by 2025, not that long away, he believes that this could grow to 35 billion and that it will be across a broad range of categories, including care, but far broader. Alistair believes that age tech is where fintech was in 2007 and is set to become mainstream in the next 10 years. Age tech solutions will rapidly advance the healthy aging agenda, and the sheer scale of need provides a massive opportunity for our design industry to play a strategic role in making the UK a world leader. Why? Well, I believe the opportunity is for design to champion users, and age tech is different from other tech sectors in 2 important ways. Firstly, aging is not an opt-in issue or a selective choice. So age tech solutions are universal, and as everyone ages, age tech solutions can support all citizens at every stage of life. Secondly, age tech is not driven by purely commercial motives. It demands a strong, socially responsible ethos from entrepreneurs, as it's vital for governments to ensure that citizens are as healthy and independent for as long as possible. While many products and services are targeted at discrete segments, age tech needs to be accessible, attractive, and used by multiple generations, not simply older users. So let me give you 2 examples of where the strategic use of design as a business tool has contributed to making successful products or services in this market. Firstly, YourMeds is a smart, patented refillable medication adherence product that works on the mobile GSM market network. Design was central to the success of the product, which was developed in 3 stages, and much of the benefit was around the look and feel and the functionality. YourMed's advice is to bring design in at as early a stage as possible to avoid costly mistakes. Secondly, WellWatch is a wearable device with a digital app which tracks well-being and integrates into existing health and social care telephony services. It's been built to operate on one of the world's popular smartwatches so that wearers can enjoy the benefits of beautifully designed technology while having the WellWatch app looking out for them. And after an initial trial of a rather clunky watch, Care UK, working with a design team, decided to partner with a popular smartwatch brand, I'm going to leave that one to your imagination, and to concentrate on the design of the app itself. And by using specialist designers, it meant they got a better result when solving the problem of things like battery drain. It also meant that they could speed up development, and the first app build took place in a mere 6 to 8 weeks. And thanks for these examples to Dr. Lorraine Morley, who's the curator of a database of over 1,000 similar international innovations and technologies in this space. As part of the UK government's industrial strategy, they see healthy aging as one of the key pillars and are investing £100 million into it. Their aim is to both address the challenge and cost we face in looking after an older population, but also to make that population more independent so we can work for longer, live at home independently for longer, and lead better, more fulfilling life. The actual target is to grow the average better life by 5 years by 2035. But equally important, and probably in many senses more challenging, is to democratize that. So that's why some colleagues and I are looking at the role design can play in changing attitudes, answering the right questions, understanding the right needs and aspirations. We're at a tipping point in this market, and this is an ideal opportunity, we believe, to develop a design age accelerator, bringing together a growing cohort of healthy aging entrepreneurs, innovators and investors with the expanding community of healthy aging aware designers and service users. The ambition of the accelerator is to address head-on the undervaluing and low investment in user-centered design by businesses by connecting solution providers with the UK's world-leading user-centered design skills and resources. The aim is to increase the scale of adoption and vestibility of innovative and disruptive solutions to meet the growing demands of this market. So if you're interested in joining in on the debate or contributing, we'd love to hear from you or visit our Healthy Aging by Design LinkedIn site. So let me finish with a quote from Dominic Endicott of 4G Ventures. And maybe this will be the result. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. And now we're pleased to hand over to Michael Albers.
Hello, thank you, John, and thank you, everybody. So my name is Mike. I am the Chief Creative Officer and co-founder of Wto Studios. We are a digital design studio based here in London, and we got acquired by TCS at the end of 2018. So I'm going to briefly talk to you guys about our studio and also some thoughts about the value of design to society from an IP perspective. So I'm going to use some quotes from these four eccentric gentlemen to make the thoughts on this topic. Starting off with Mr. David Bowie. So in the mid-70s, a young journalist named Cameron Crowe followed Mr. Bowie in LA for about 6 months. And I think he asked him, do you consider yourself an original thinker? And the response was, not by any means. I'm more like a tasteful thief. The only art I'll ever study is the stuff I can steal from. And I think this is really interesting because there's this idea that, nothing is new. Everything is a version of something else. And good art is thoughtful and deliberate about what it copies and how it transformed the source. So if we actually take this and we go to the next slide, this was our brand. So we founded in 2012. My business partner and I met at the BBC. We tried to come up with a very intelligent name, struggled. So we thought we'd choose this name, Wto Studios, which is a bit of a homage to where we started, which is the BBC, which is the postcode W12. And it's actually a really challenging task as a designer to design your own studio's logo. So we chose something that's quite simple, geometric, a bit bold, and we trademarked it and protected it in May 2012. If we then fast forward a few months later, one of the designers said, hey, look at this. It was from a freelance visual designer here in London, a guy called Luke, and it's literally an exact replica of our logo, but flipped horizontally. So we, of course, got in contact. Luke, a really, really nice guy, and he had loads of evidence that he actually made the same logo. So he showed us his working files and like all these screenshots in an email. And then on the next page, he he obviously had kind of came to a similar conclusion. So, we chatted to him, he cooperated, slightly modified his logo, and, we didn't really want to pursue legal action. At the end of the day, your reputation as a designer is very, very important, and people in London talk, so we wanted to keep everything going. So again, you keep searching, and then there was this company in Minnesota called Wellington Industries. They make kind of construction of sophisticated metal forming tools and dies. There's another one called Wiv, who make sandals and insoles. And again, this logo looks almost identical to ours. And Wealthify, yet another one, which is an investment platform here in London. These are probably the people that we should have asked for money, but we didn't end up going to them. And then the next one, these guys didn't steal our logo, but they actually completely copied our name. So Wto Studios is another company founded in 2018. And we said here, like, all publicity is good publicity. So let's not do anything. But these guys are actually a restaurant based in West London. For a long time, they sat on the top of the Google search terms for a while. And since our acquisition with TCS, we've changed our name a little bit and we've kind of bubbled to the top. And before the pandemic, we had a lot of people calling us to make dinner reservations or showing up in our studio in Camden to see if they could grab a drink. So going on to the next part, another quote being from Goethe, who's a German writer and statesman from 1749. This is all about the idea of mashups. So being the sum of one's influences. And he said, what we love is like gravity, constantly pulling us in. In this constant pull, our path is changed. So if you take a step back and you look at all these artists on the next slide, these people come from the widest range of genres, different eras. You have NWA, you have Carl Cox, who's one of the founders and godfathers of techno music. You have David Bowie, you have The Prodigy, Slipknot, who are a death metal band. They actually have one thing in common, which is this track. And this track is called Amen Brother by the Winstons. They released this track in 1969. And the track actually is really well known for this 6-second 4-bar drum beat. And it's the most famous loop of all times. It's been used 3,500 times by every single type of genre, from hip hop to jungle to drum and bass. However, the kind of sad thing here is that the Winstons actually never received any royalties for this sample. And the drummer that played this piece actually passed away in 2006, homeless. So I'll play this track and you can see exactly what it sounds like. So again, that song has been sped up and slowed down for so many different genres of music, from hip hop to drum and bass to rock and to death metal. Now, if we go to the next slide, this is a collection of paintings from a few of the Dutch masters. Couldn't resist adding something from the homeland, which is where I'm from. They're all really, really interesting, but there's one thing that they have in common, which is actually not the medium, technique, or the era. It's actually this item. It's called the Memorial Guild Ewer, which was created by a silversmith called Adam van Viana in 1614. This memorial he built for his brother Paulus, who had passed away, and it apparently appeared in 50 different paintings during that period. Now, it's a really odd object, but it's, it really kind of set a trend in the time. And it's believed that this ewer is made of a single sheet of silver. And apparently today it's even impossible to replicate by any of the tools that we have or silversmiths. It set a new style called quab. And this is the reason why people incorporated it into their art, because it set a trend, it did something different. And it's what today, if you look at kind of screen design, neomorphism is doing. A lot of people are stealing these influences and making it their own. And it's now used in furniture, picture frames, and weapons, etc. So the last quote is from Jean-Luc Godard. He is a French-Swiss film director. And again, he was heavily involved in the 1960s in the French New Wave film movement. And he says, it's not where you take things from, it's where you take them to. The message I want for you to take is that you can use someone else's idea, but you're required to think and make it better. And I think this is very important to us as designers, is It's our role and our job to create something that has not yet been created. We should be inspired by the world around us, people around us, and we need to push things to find a solution that makes life better. So if we go to the next slide, electric vehicles appeared in the mid-19th century. Nowadays, obviously, you have Tesla, which is a household name, an incredibly successful company. I recently bought a new house, so I'm really obsessed with mowers at the moment, which sounds a bit bizarre. There's a really interesting correlation between these two. So this mower is actually a company called Green Mean Mowing Machine, based in the US, and they were inspired by Tesla's batteries. So previously they tried to build these electric mowers, but they got really heavy because they were using car batteries, which are known as deep cycle batteries. And what lithium ion allows them to do, which is the same batteries in your phone, in a car, etc., they allow the power to weight ratio to improve drastically. They charge quicker, they're easier to maintain, and most importantly, they're not consuming thousands of liters of diesel. And I think this is interesting, where you start taking technologies and ideas from other sectors and applying them so you can benefit society, but also most importantly, benefiting the planet. Another idea here, or another example, is on the left, we have this thing called Dribbble. Dribbble is a platform for designers and creatives to share their work. So people create what's called a shot, they upload it, lots of people see it, and then they do this thing called rebounding, where somebody takes that, modifies it slightly, and publishes it again. What's interesting is that it keeps it in somewhat of a threaded conversation, and it allows people to kind of engage with the community, learn about their skills, learn how to improve, but it's all kind of collected, and it's really kind of nurturing this, this community of designers. On the right, again, a similar example, you have GitHub, which is a place where developers can post their source code, other developers can take that, learn it, remix it, create new branches. And this idea that everyone is sharing and building upon each other's work, I think is fundamental to the advancement of us as a society. Go next. Of course, no designer can leave out Apple. So in my opinion, I think Apple is one of the biggest democratizers of design. Yes, they have a closed ecosystem, but their app store is really what's propelled them forward. And what's interesting is that Apple has continuously set the bar for what a digital experience should be. So applying for insurance should be as easy as ordering an Uber. Finding something to watch should be as enjoyable as finding a date on Tinder. And I think lots of companies that come to us and ask us to help them are always, familiar with these examples. And it's these companies that are successful because they're building new paradigms and ways to make things easy. They're making, complex things much more simple. And this is not only affecting consumers, but also employees and employers. So to summarize, I think I'm at my 10-minute mark. To summarize, I wanted to leave with this last quote from Salvador Dali, who says, "Those who do not want to imitate anything produce nothing." So thank you very much. And I think I'm handing it over to Steve.
You are indeed. Thank you, Mike. Fascinating stuff. So good afternoon, everybody. I am the Insight Director at Brand Finance. And in my role, obviously, it's often the way for me to bring the voice of the consumer or end user into discussions like this. The key point about brand and product design is that when it's done really well, everyone's a winner. Yes, society is a winner, if you like, because people are getting products that are nicer to use, easier to find, bringing some kind of style and color into their lives, and generally giving a little bit of pleasure into people's lives, making it a better place to live. So there is definitely, in my view, a benefit to consumers and people at large through great design. But we're brand finance, so we're also looking at what's the business case as well. And I think we'll, in these 10 minutes, show that it's a kind of win-win for everybody, really. Of course, brand owners are winners through great design too. We know that distinctive and appealing design can help strengthen brand equity and in turn deliver great sales and profits. So, in 10 minutes, let's just have a quick walk through how good design contributes to brand strength and appeal, what makes great design great, in fact, how you can evaluate You know, is your design really best in class? Can you improve it? Should you improve it? What should you do? And then lastly, just take a quick look at some design successes in the commercial world, game changers, where we've seen, you know, fantastic design really win in a commercial sense. So next slide, please, Georgie. I'm going to start really with the perspectives first of the brand owner. I mean, it's fairly common sense, but there's strong evidence and consensus that great design is a significant brand asset. Any brand manager wants their brand to stand out from the crowd, and obviously superior and distinctive design is the route to achieve that. But that's going to be especially important where you've got, you know, basically products all offering similar levels of functionality. They all do the job pretty well. It's often the case that, you know, design and great design is the route that you have to go down to make your brand stand apart and justify some kind of premium, or just, you know, win a greater share of people's hearts and minds. We want our brands to be memorable, easier to find in shopping situations, but memorability is more than just so I can find it easily. Good design pushes all the right memory buttons in terms of emotional associations and imagery. Now, and it basically makes the brand more attractive and desirable. We know this. So you'd say, yeah, all very well for the brand owner, but how does this really benefit society at large, or is this just a way that shareholders win? I'd say no. Products which are more attractive, more stylish, easier to use, allow people to express themselves, these are genuine benefits to people. And even in the more functional ways, you know, few supermarket shoppers are going to complain if they can find your product on shelf a bit more easily. So everyone can win. Next slide, please. So we can all think of successful design-led brands. Look, you can't do a presentation like this without mentioning Apple, obviously. Apple's own analysis has put a monetary value on its design, and we know that you know, its consistent leadership in terms of design has enabled Apple to win, not so much just in terms of market share, but in terms of the price premium and profitability of Apple. But you say, well, we can't all be Apple. But if you look at the work of Byron Sharp and the Ehrenberg Bass Institute, they've outlined how design can contribute to brands of all types, all kinds of product categories and services, not just tech and shiny toys. So Sharp's analysis really focuses on the role of mental availability as a key factor in brand growth. Now, this is the degree to which a buyer will notice your brand, recognize you, and think about you when they're thinking of buying your kind of product. Think about you at all, but even better still, think good things about you by cueing the, you know, positive memories and impressions, getting those more top of mind. Sharp talks about buying situations, but we must also remember things like word of mouth and social media, those kinds of occasions where you might not be buying, but you can steer somebody else towards the brand. The easier the brand is to access in memory in more situations for more people, then there's higher mental availability. And Sharp also shows that distinctive brand assets, that is good design, you could argue, help enormously in boosting and reinforcing mental availability. You've got good design, you notice more readily, positive brand cues are instantly, subconsciously triggered. It helps all of the things that people might love about your brand to come to mind, because that might be the design itself. Next slide, please. So the empirical benefits are proven, and that's reflected in the way that we at Brand Finance evaluate and value brands. We have our brand strength index framework, which incorporates a number of brand metrics where design plays a role. Think, you know, things like familiarity, which is one of the measures in all our brand evaluations. That's obviously enhanced through good design, as is the distinctiveness of a brand. And good design will add to brand equity in other ways, reinforcing brand imagery in all sorts of ways. If it's offering functional or ergonomic benefits, customer satisfaction can be affected. And there may be some benefits on the performance side in terms of its performance on shelf or in other purchase situations. But also our BSI framework encourages brands to think about other stakeholders, not just the end user or customer. What about staff, for example? There's many ways in which good design can make their lives better, and in our world, that will make your brand stronger there too. But it's really equity in broadly where the societal benefits come through. It's not just the benefits to the brand owner. On most of these equity dimensions, the brand is only gaining where customers, some other stakeholders' lives are improved in some way. We're not saying they're necessarily life-changing improvements, but marketers shouldn't feel apologetic about bringing a little bit of pleasure and colour into people's lives. That's something that design can do. Cheer people up, if only for a short time. Next slide. So, good design's worth having. Every brand owner should assess whether their brand is delivering here. I'm not going to talk a lot about evaluation testing. Give me a call or drop me a line later if you'd like to pick the brains on this. But you can see we've got a framework for assessing whether design is delivering and whether your brand design is contributing as much as it could. There's lots of kind of tools and data you're going to use as an input into that evaluation. Brand tracking in particular should be able to give you signals, and including some kind of driver analysis to see whether a design is contributing to the contribution and choice for your brand. But don't overlook internal assessments, or just having a look on shelf really to see whether the design is working the way you'd like it to. If you need an upgrade, yes, there is some kind of testing that can be done. I'm not going to get into detail on testing approaches, just a couple of things to bear in mind: that you will get often some kind of bias towards the familiar when you're testing design, and you have to allow for that. And also try and think in advance, some kind of action standard. If you're doing some kind of A/B versus B test, what does a win need to look like? How big does it need to be before you justify the disruption, the cost of change? Next slide, please. But enough of the theory then. For the last few minutes, let's just take a look at what design brings, in my opinion, to some very successful brands. So have a look at Bombay Sapphire now. This brand's over 30 years old now, so you could say it's now become something of a design classic. And using our kind of framework that we would put into our brand strength index, I'd say that Bombay Sapphire ticks many, if not all, the boxes. Yes, there's a degree of familiarity now. I think it is a classic. I think in terms of some of the ways in which design can enhance brand equity and brand image, I think Bombay Sapphire's designs really do score well here. The reputation of the brand, it's a premium brand, and the design supports that. The image connotations from the design definitely enhanced. It's a nice bottle to use. I think satisfaction, you don't think of customer satisfaction in alcohol in this kind of way, but I think I would argue it's a very pleasing design that people are happy to use and happy to show in usage situations. And it was a game changer. There's no question that gin, it's now a very trendy category. I'd say Bombay Sapphire's introduction was the first stirrings of a turning of the category from a rather tired golf club kind of category into something fit for the 21st century. So it's definitely contributed to a whole reevaluation of an entire product category. As has my next example, George, if you please, which is another familiar design winner, which is IKEA, of course. Again, it's fantastic design, enduring design, familiar to everybody, supports a very strong reputation. I think the brand does have a good reputation. We can make jokes about the furniture, but it is a design winner, unique and distinctive. All the image cues that come from those colors and the design around the perceptions of the product and Swedish design and all the other great imagery that IKEA has definitely enhanced, and design unquestionably contributed enormously to that brand's success. And then lastly, Apple, of course. Now, I've not ticked the box on familiarity, because when this design was first introduced, of course, it wasn't familiar, but it instantly was a winner. Conquered the category from day one. Distinctive, better design. It's what Apple's whole business success has been based on. Satisfied users, evangelists are not users of this brand. It's an obvious winner. But again, this is stuff that you can measure. Next slide, please. But ultimately, I should stress that this is not something that is an aspect of a formula. There's no question that great design is a fantastic asset for any brand, but the way in which great design is assessed is not the way great design is made. We've got a measurable framework for assessing whether design is working, but as a researcher, I must stress there is no formula for design success. It's a creative process, and there's no substitute for creativity. And I'd argue that the way in which the design leaders are successful is not just from bits of inspired creativity here and there. I'd say it's a design-led culture and value set that sets them apart. Value is in their DNA, and it's there in everything that they do. And that's something that every brand and arguably society more broadly can benefit from. Thank you very much. Back to you, I think, Zoe.
Thank you very much, Steve. And thank you to all our speakers today. And now, of course, we'd like to provide the opportunity for our attendees to participate in a Q&A with our panel. And to moderate today's discussion, I'm pleased to introduce Gabriela Salinas, Managing Director of the Brand Finance Institute, the Educational and Training Division of Brand Finance, which offers world-class executive training on brand strategy and valuation. Gabby, please, can we start with the first question?
Yes, thank you, Zoe, for the introduction. And thank you to all the speakers. I think those were great presentations, very instructive and inspirational. I really enjoyed them. What I learned before I go into the questions, I think is that great design is a formal response to strategic questions, and the value of design for society. And it kept me thinking your presentation, Mike, when you talk about imitation and the source of inspiration, in the fine line between inspiration, imitation, and infringement, actually. And I think we have some questions on that. So let's start with the first question. Can design be seen as good for society if it is designed to mainly attract attention in a store or mainly support brand marketing objectives? I'm not sure who would like to start. Or you, Steve, were talking about the value of design for society. If you want to pick it up first.
Well, I mean, I certainly do believe that's the case. I hope in my little talk that I gave very clear illustrations of how great design. Yes, of course, it's something which brands are using to further their own causes. But if they're delivering tangible benefits to people, then society is a winner too. And I genuinely think it is. But I'd really be interested to know what John and Mike feel about that.
Yeah, I can chime in. I totally agree. I guess it depends what the store is pulling the person in to buy. If it's good for design, if it's good for society or not. I think in general, to me, design is, it sounds corny, but it is a way of life. And I think at the end of the day, as a designer, your big goal is always to create something that makes things better. That can be a really small thing. It doesn't have to be solving world hunger or, battling COVID. It can sometimes be those little things that just cause a little bit of delight and make someone's day better. I think that for us, when I was in a consultancy, you do all this great work and people kind of clap and they say, great, but it doesn't necessarily hit the market. And then when I went to the BBC, you do work and you make tweaks on things like iPlayer, and you make a tweak that you think is going to make things better, and suddenly you get 20,000 emails of people that are very, very angry because you removed something. So I do think that design fundamentally is always, its main purpose and its aim is to improve life. That sounds maybe a bit too kind of ambitious, but I do think that's the purpose of design.
Good, thank you for that. So the other question is, over the last few years, all of the major management consultancies have been buying design and service design consultancies. What effect do you think this will have in the long term? And then here's the tricky part. Don't you think it's about time brand finance did the same? Not sure who would like to pick that
So
question.
maybe I could answer that one, and I'll maybe have a few thoughts about the first question as well.
Okay.
I think there's a very interesting, the Danish Design Society did this very famous design ladder, which is talking about where most people think about design, which is at the very bottom of the ladder, which is actually where you bring design in often at the end of a process to make things look good. But as you move up the ladder and as you get to the very top of the ladder, I think it was Steve that talked about design being an ethos that a company has that drives the company. Apple is a very good example of design being an ethos that is at the very heart of the organization, not just about the way that the products look and behave, although that's an important part of it. And it's where design is increasingly being seen as a strategic management tool, that it's starting to make a real difference. And that's why the management consultancies are actually getting in on the game and buying up service design thinkers left, right, and center. And the important thing for me about that is that it gets design in at the very heart of the C-suite. It means that suddenly design is talked about strategically. And I think there's a very famous cover of the Harvard Business Review 2 or 3 years ago where they talked about design thinking being the new management tool. But I still think that it's the danger is the word design is so confusing. For those of us who really understand design, we know that design is a way of thinking about putting the user at the very heart of what the process that we follow, and actually making sure that we're really delivering something that people want and need, not what we can produce. And to me, the really important thing increasingly about design is that it can do good in society, and it can drive changes in the way that companies behave and in the way that products are delivered, but it can deliver things that can actually make our lives better. And if design is going to make a big difference at the moment, it's going to make some changes to the things that will need to change in our society as we get older. I mean, I've been through that one, but also the changes that we're going to have in the way that we behave with each other and to each other as a result of the pandemic. And I think that designers can tackle those big problems in a way that very few other disciplines can actually do.
That's great. Steve and Mike, do you want to comment on that, or we can move to the other question? Otherwise,
I'd love to answer that. So, I mean, I've obviously gone through this experience of joining TCS in 2018, and I think, you know, when you have your own studio, it's your baby. You don't want to let go. You're like, oh no, we're going to be bought out by a big company. But the reality is, and when we're having the talks with TCS, what was so interesting is that ability to do more together than you can on your own, right? We've been going for 8 years. We kind of hit the ceiling. And then with TCS, that partnership has just kind of exploded. And we're having these conversations with people that we would have never had access to being on our own. And I think, again, with TCS, the benefit is they see the value design has. They also see that the strategic opportunities that it opens with the clients that they work with. And I think then engaging with those clients, again, you start to open up the world of possibilities. And as designers, I think it's our skill and our main craft to look at things or problems holistically and come up with a solution, making it tangible for people so that it's not kind of abstract strategy documents, but it's actually something tangible that can put in people's hand and say, does this work? Does this not work? Is this achieving what we need it to do?
Yeah, that reminds me of a quote from Alina Wheeler, you may know. She said, design is intelligence made visible, right? So the other question that we have is, can market research really help identify great designs? Don't consumers like familiar designs in surveys and reject anything radical and different? So who would like to take that?
Well, I guess that one's pointing at me as a researcher, but again, I'd be interested in the other panelists' views on this. Yeah, it's a known issue in market research. If you're depending on how you test things, and if you use very blunt kind of testing approaches, you're going to get a tendency for very conservative, familiar designs win. But I think with the right kind of sensitivity and a creative research approach, you can definitely get around that. And also, you know, it's a matter of the way in which the research is interpreted. I've been involved in pre-testing, you know, designs which, you know, have pointed very clearly to, you know, some quite radical design changes or solutions that consumers can't accept. I mean, yes, something that's really avant-garde may be difficult to win in a testing situation, but consumers, you know, can see beyond that, and they're increasingly kind of design literate in any case, and don't necessarily get too constrained by familiar choices.
I'd like to add something to that if possible. So I think testing and research and all those things do play a valuable part, but I think it's very important that they play a part. And I think this is where Wto again is maybe a bit out on a limb here. If you look at traditional design practices, so my background is actually in furniture design and product design. My business partner was an architect. Architect will design a building for a human. It's given, but you would never choose an architect that says, I'm going to build you a house that can stand. That's somewhat of a given. And to me, I think it's the same thing with user-centered design. Of course it needs to be simple. Of course it needs to be user-centric. But I think the big role we need to play as designers, again, is to create something iconic, to create something that's relevant for the brand, something the brand can own, and something that can actually differentiate it in the market. I think just being simple and user-centered is not enough. And unfortunately, if you speak to people and ask them what they want, they'll only be able to tell you what they know. It's very difficult for them to paint a picture of something abstract or something that's not yet been created. So it's a fine balance of the two. You need to make sure it works and you need to do the research, but there's also a little bit of a leap of faith and a little bit of the kind of the gut feel of trying something different and bringing that to life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would add you certainly don't, as Mike suggests, just simply ask people what they want. That is not the way to assess design at all. You've got to, I mean, it's a show and evaluate kind of approach, which means basically, you know, you start with a creative process and then see if you've got something that you think is going to win.
Yeah, actually, Steve, I was thinking about that because in one of the books that Wally Ollins wrote on brand, he gave the example of Baileys and how they tried the naming on people, and people hated it. They say they would ever drink it, and now people don't take it intravenous because it's not available, right? But it's so successful. And I think, you know, when Wally Ollins said, you know, that shows the value of testing, I think he was wrong, because testing is valuable, but it's also a question of design, how you design, you know, the testing and all that research. So I think we have time for 2 more questions. So I'm going to pick 2. Which brand do you think would benefit from a good design upgrade? I mean, I hope it's not any of your clients that you're thinking probably.
Well, let me answer that, if I may.
Of course.
I'm a great believer that the best design is design that you don't notice. And the reason I say that is that in general, what you notice is bad design. You don't notice good design because actually you use it, it functions, it looks good, and it does what it needs to do. And that's why I think that we need, I mean, if I you know, staying true to the topic that I talked about earlier on, I think there's a whole real need for design to take a serious look at the sort of products and services that we need to develop for an older population, and to take products out of hospital wards and put them into houses and think that that will suffice is just no longer the right sort of thing. So I would give accolades to anyone who was developing products and services that actually functioned in the home, that made people's lives in the home easier and make them live there longer and do a really good job. And nobody, when coming into that home, would think this is a house for an older person.
Thank you, John. Then we have one question just arrived. how much are designers paying attention to accessibility, standards for diversity and inclusion?
I would say all the time. I think being a good designer, you need to be a lot more conscious these days of designing the right thing for people. Being a father of a deaf child, it's really, really on top of my agenda. And we do the same thing with all of our designers to make sure that they're following accessibility guidelines. And also still, sometimes people, I think as designers think, oh, accessibility means you take the fun out of everything and you make everything look really boring. I don't think that's the case. I think design is always about constraints. And I think it's about how are you finding creative and engaging ways to make those constraints work for you. And I think, yeah, it's just people need to be more and more conscious of it. But I think there's a long, long, long way to go before we're actually giving everybody the right tools that they need to design for people.
Okay, I'm not sure if we have the time for one more, Zoe, or pass it on to you.
I think, to be honest, we will need to start to wrap up, I think. So we'll pass it back to David Haig, who will give his comments on the presentations discussed today.
Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you,
fantastic
Gabby.
session. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all the speakers, and thank you very much to Gabby for coordinating that discussion. I certainly found all three speeches extremely interesting and have fulfilled why we actually chose design. The interesting thing about design is the more you think about it, the wider the scope is. You know, you're talking about product and service design, industrial design, ergonomic design, architectural design, packaging, visual, graphic. There are many different aspects of design, and any one of them can actually transform a product. Now, to one of the questions there, which product needs or which company needs to upgrade, my thought, perhaps not surprisingly, immediately went to corkscrews for opening bottles of wine. Because as much as I've looked over the years, I can never find a corkscrew that is actually any good. They're always rubbish, and it's very hard to get the wine out. And the interesting thing is they've now moved on from corkscrews, and they have screw-top bottles. So they've solved the problem by a different means. And all they had to do was to convince people that screw-top wine was as good as corked wine, and it was all fine. But I would say that there is still some way to go to persuade people that it's the right solution. But it certainly works for me. So I think that's just a simple example of how clever design can actually transform the way you consume a product. The two things that I want to leave you with today, one is we've talked a lot about plagiarism, basically, and whether or not you can take designs and amend them and change them. And there is a fundamental business issue here, which is that the whole ethos of companies like us and the lawyers and so on is to encapsulate design into things like patents and copyrights and design rights to prevent other people from doing that kind of thing. And the question, is design good for society, is yes, it is. And the more innovation you get, the better. But sadly, it cuts across business and financial needs. Someone like Warren Buffett is always going on about how he wants businesses with moats, i.e. keep people out, don't let them copy, don't let them steal your money. But clearly that is a constraint on the development of new societal designs. And so there's a counterpoint there between the right of companies to be able to recoup their investment in design and innovative thinking, while on the other hand, what it does for society and what is right. And there have always been very big debates about how long should patents be, what should we be allowed to charge. And I hope that in the subsequent session, certainly the last session is all about business, that we'll pick this up again and talk about the counterpoint between a society that constantly wants to push forward with new innovations like the better corkscrew or the better mousetrap, combined with the one about the right of companies to protect their assets. So the other thing, and it's sort of tied up with that, is the level of investment in design. I think it's fair to say that most people believe design is a Cinderella industry and has not really been given the credit it deserves for tax breaks, direct subsidies, and investment by corporates. And those countries and companies that have invested heavily, like Germany, for example, have tended to outperform the rest of the world. So it's a rallying cry, really. More needs to be invested, more needs to be looked at. And one last comment is on the question of should brand finance be into design. It's interesting, really. I think we have defined within brand finance the limits of what we do. We like designing systems for measuring and looking at the performance of brands, But I think we believe that to get into actual execution compromises our position. So we work closely with a lot of other design firms. We recommend them, we evaluate them, but we don't, fools rush in where angels fear to tread. And where it comes to design, I think we will leave it to the experts. With that, I hope you all enjoyed it, and I hope you'll come and join us for our next 2 sessions. Thank you very much, and see you again.
Lovely, thank you very much, David. I just wanted to end on a very quick note, and thank you to all our speakers for the very insightful presentation and very interesting discussion today. It was certainly an action-packed hour, so we had a lot to get through, which was fantastic. I would like to encourage all our guests today to complete the survey that will pop up at the end of this presentation. And also, as a reminder, as the links I popped through in the chat section of the webinar, please register for our upcoming webinars in the Brand Finance Global Forum series. 5th of November, the Value of Design to Customers, and the 10th of December, the Value of Design to Businesses. And of course, if you'd like any further information on today's topic or how to register for upcoming events, please email events@brandfinance.com. Once again, thank you for joining us today, and we of course look forward to reconnecting with you all soon. Thank you very much.